2023. Roll call.
Chair
Thank you.
Simpson,
Present, barely.
Vice Chair Wydola,
Present.
Commissioner Kai,
Present.
Commissioner Vance,
Present.
Commissioner Montalvo.
All right, thank you very much. Consent agenda this evening consists of the approval of the January 24th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there any changes or a motion?
I move we approve. I'll second.
All right, it's been moved that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council liaison announcements. Councilor Stampy.
Hello. At our last work session, we discussed the outdoor seating permit in Old Town. That was a temporary permit, and as a council, we are going to draft an ordinance to make that a more permanent thing. The sidewalk will be year-round, and the parking spaces will be seasonal for the summer. And we don't have the final language yet for that, but that's the general idea for that. And then as the URA board, we voted unanimously to endorse the alignment of the Southwest Ice Age Drive as the local preferred alternative for final design and construction. And that's it.
Excellent. And that was done as the URA board.
Correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Staff announcements.
Good evening, Commission. We have 2 vacancies on the Planning Commission, so those of you at home that are wanting to serve on the commission, you can find the application online on the city's website. And then we have a Sherwood West CAC meeting coming up on March 2nd at 5:30 p.m. in this room.
Any more announcements while I panic and look at my calendar to make sure that it's on there? Okay, so you haven't sent out the final confirmation then? I have a tentative hold only.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's confirmed March 2nd.
Right now, yes.
Subject to last minute changes. Okay. That's it?
That's it.
All right. Community comments. Community comments are limited to those items not already on the agenda. I do not have any blue cards indicating anybody wishes to speak this evening. All right. Moving forward, we have a public hearing that is continued. Interesting. Okay. The public hearing on LU 2022-028 MM Sherwood Commerce Center Phase 1 is called to order. I'm now going to turn to staff for the hearing introduction.
The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present the staff report. There will be questions, if any, by the hearing body for staff. We will then open the public hearing for testimony, and time will be limited as follows. Applicants 30 minutes, persons in favor of the application 4 minutes, persons opposed to the application 4 minutes, and then rebuttal by the applicant and is any remainder of the 30 minutes. Then no other public testimony will be taken from the public unless the public testimony period is reopened. We'll have final comments by staff and then questions of staff, if any, by the commission, and deliberations by the commission will follow. A decision may be made by the Planning Commission at the close of the hearing, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain. If the matter is continued to a date certain, this will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Staff, we didn't receive any notification 24 hours in advance from anyone wanting to provide testimony virtually. But if you're in the audience this evening and wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms. It's the blue form out on the table, and submit it to planning staff. The chair will recognize people who wish to speak. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record. Any questions should be addressed through the chair. In reaching a decision on the application, the commission must consider whether the application meets the relevant approval criteria in the city's land use regulations. Those criteria are identified in the staff report. The staff report is available online and at City Hall, and the staff report was accessible to the public 7 days prior to the meeting date. The testimony and evidence must address these criteria or any other criteria you believe to apply to the decision. Please note, failure to raise an issue with enough detail to enable the commission and the applicant and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an appeal to the City Council or Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Also, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues regarding proposed conditions of approval, again, with without enough detail to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. At this time, I would like to ask members of the commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. And please indicate the nature and extent of those ex parte contacts, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing this evening. Commissioner Waidola.
I have no ex parte communications, no bias, and plan to participate tonight.
Commissioner Vance.
I have no ex parte contact, bias, or what was the third thing?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest, yes. And I do wish to participate.
Commissioner Kai.
I have none and I plan to participate.
Commissioner Montalvo.
I have no conflicts and I plan to participate.
And Chair Simpson.
I have no ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest and plan to participate this evening.
And does any member of the audience wish to challenge any planning commission members' ability to participate? All right, so hearing none, I will now turn to Mr. Rutledge for the staff report.
Thanks, Erica. Good evening, Chair Simpson, Vice Chair Waidola, and commissioners. Eric Rutledge, Community Development Director. Happy to be giving this presentation for LU 2022-028MM. Applicant is Jordan Ramis, PC, and the proposal is to remove and modify the conditions of approval B3 and B4. We have sent notice of the application to affected agencies and provided public notice, including mailed notice to property owners within 1,000 feet of the site. No public comments have been received to date. Just as a reminder of where the site is, this is an approximately 38-acre site on the south side of Oregon Street in the city's Tonkin employment area, and the property zoned employment industrial. This site has received land use approval and a few different modifications. And what you have in front of you this evening is an additional modification just specifically related to a few conditions of approval. So what has been approved, site plan is shown here. So Oregon Street is at this corner of the property, and what's been approved is 3 buildings for approximately 445,000 square feet. Light industrial uses, or specifically what we call employment industrial uses. The modifications that we have approved the alignment and future construction of Tonkin Court on the side of the property here, and then also what we're calling the east-west road to the south of the phase 1. And eventually that road will connect up to Ice Age Drive here. So just moving on, this is the Ice Age Drive alignment that was just mentioned, and here's Ice Age Drive here, coming all the way down from Oregon Street and connecting to 124th. So this is the alignment that the URA board endorsed at their last meeting. The site is here, Tonkin Court, and then this east-west road to the south, which will eventually connect up to Ice Age Drive. So just really good from a staff perspective, and hopefully from a planning commission perspective as well. You know, we're finally getting through the details here, and really getting pretty close to finalizing the plans. The site's been graded, and building permits are very close to being issued. Likely will be issued next month in March. The specifics of this modification that you are considering, it's related to primarily to the Kinder Morgan gas line that goes through the future Ice Age Drive and just a small portion of their property here. So the current existing line is shown in yellow. It comes this way and then slants. Obviously, the future Ice Age Drive shown here, and the proposed relocation area is shown here in orange. So it'd be along the north side of the road, along this length, and eventually connect back into its existing location at a point to the south. And then, we want to be very mindful of what the future road cross-section will actually look like, understanding that a portion of it will likely be dedicated back to Kinder Morgan as an easement. And so as part of this, as part of the application and staff report, we've kind of shown you the best and worst case scenario. Again, the best case scenario is a continuation of the design along the rest of the Ice Age Drive road. And so that would be a 12-foot. We're really just looking at this north section where the easement would be, future easement would be located. And so we're looking in the best case scenario at a 12-foot multi-use path, 5-foot landscape strip, shrubs, no trees, and then lighting on that one side. And this would be the worst case scenario where Kinder Morgan would say, sorry, you can't put anything over our easement. It just needs to be basically, low-lying vegetation. In that case, we wanted to make sure through this process that we could get a complete road pavement section in. So you can see in all of the alternatives that we have, the road pavement section is the same. 2 travel lanes, either a median section or a turn lane in the middle. It's likely for some of this it'll be landscaped, so this median is not shown here, but it's likely that this would be landscaped for a portion where it's appropriate given the site distance and turn lanes. And then we have a few other options just to kind of show that there's a lot of different possibilities here. So trees on this side to even out the landscaping on each side. And then in this scenario, a 16-foot multi-use path and reducing this one down to 8 feet, again, just to show different options for the street cross-section design. These are the 2 conditions of approval that would be removed, condition B3 and condition B4. Won't go into detail on them, but these are proposed to be struck from the approval. And again, this is all in an effort to get the applicant out from working with Kinder Morgan and really being likely delayed significantly by Kinder Morgan approval, and the approaches that the city will take on that negotiation and relocation of the line as part of our larger Ice Age Drive project. And the main reason that makes sense is because Kinder Morgan and that line is going to impact not just this portion of the roadway. The Kinder Morgan line continues off-site and is going to impact this portion of the roadway as well, and also this connector road. So instead of going through 2 different applications, one from the applicant, one from the city, it just makes sense for the city to take the lead on that. And then the revised conditions of approval, we worked pretty closely with the applicant on this, legal counsel on both sides. So I won't read all of them or go through all of them, but just to say that I can answer questions if you have any specific questions on them. But the intent here is to give the applicant certainty on the roadway alignment, which is good that the URA board just endorsed that alignment. So give the applicant certainty that the right-of-way location is not going to change so that they can move forward with building permits. Give them certainty that they're not going to have to get any type of approval from Kinder Morgan, which would, again, result in delays, clarifying that the city will take on that role. And then from the city side, we wanted to make sure that we got the property in the correct manner, being through the correct type of deed, so that we could right away start working with Kinder Morgan on the relocation, and then making sure that we get the property in a short amount of time so that we can actually get those agreements done with Kinder Morgan and actually get the road built. So those are the goals. Happy to answer any specific questions, but a lot of attorneys looking at this over the last few weeks, so we can answer any questions. One very specific but small change to the staff report. Originally, we were thinking that the applicant would dedicate 56 feet of right-of-way and 20 feet of easement. That was just a typo. What we're actually proposing through the conditions is 76 feet of right-of-way as fee property. And so in the final staff report or final findings, we would correct that in the findings. And with that, staff recommends approval of the major modification as conditioned in the revised staff report dated February 7th, 2023, and happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions of staff before we call the applicant up?
Yeah, quick question. So this is Is this an easement or are they actually deeding part of the property to the city
Be a deed.
through a statutory warranty deed? Okay, got it.
That's to give the city the most flexibility in working with Kinder Morgan right off the bat. And if we need to, we would then dedicate part of that as an easement to Kinder Morgan. So that northern 20 feet would likely be dedicated to Kinder Morgan as an easement.
Okay,
From
so
the city.
it'll be city-owned property now, and that's, we can just negotiate
And that
with the
gives
owner.
us the most flexibility.
And it's conveyance and fee, so what consideration is just part of the application process? Your approval of the whole thing is
Yeah, there's
consideration for this?
no monetary value.
Yeah, okay.
Does this change the application at all in regards to like the building locations or any other? We're not encroaching any further. It was always going to be 76 feet. It was whether it was 56 and 20, and now it's just one combined of 76.
Correct. And
Okay.
I think the concern, I mean, the reason why we're doing all of this and the concern from the applicant, not to speak for them, but the concern from the applicant was that the actual, it's always going to be 76 feet. That's the road width for Ice Age Drive. The concern was that the alignment would actually have to change in the future. And so we're giving them through this condition the certainty that the alignment's going to stay the same relative to their site plan.
Because there's no easement on their property related to this corner. I'm sure there's other easements, but
Yep.
as it relates to this section that we're looking at, there are no further right-of-way.
Correct. So once they give us the property, they're done basically with the right-of-way dedication for Ice Age Drive and any type of relocation of the gas line with Kinder Morgan, that the city's going to accept the right-of-way with the easement, with the Kinder Morgan line within that property, and we will work with Kinder Morgan to relocate the line, and they don't have to deal with that.
Okay. Any other questions before we?
And just to clarify, that'd be for all phases of the Sherwood Commerce Center? Because this is phase one, right? So
Yeah, the phase two, really, there shouldn't be any improvements that are, that this Kinder Morgan line is encumbering. So, yes, I mean, it will, I don't want to speak, for a future application, but based on the, we would take a look at it at that time and just make sure there's nothing else crazy going on. But, this is, I mean, we could say with some certainty, though, it comes off the property here, and their phase two is going to be all, way down here. There might be other things on phase two that come up during a title
But not
report or
related to
something like
this.
that, but not related to this, yeah.
yeah, I was curious just because in condition of approval G6, we just say Sherwood Commerce Center, and we don't specify phase one. I was curious on that. So,
Yeah, I think it would be specific to this application.
okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And somebody at city council or somebody's reviewed the title report, preliminary title report, legal description, all that stuff?
Yes,
We're all
our legal
quite
counsel,
sure.
who's quietly sitting at home, but observing all of
Yes.
this, has taken a close look at it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, we've reviewed a title report and we worked with the applicant to draft that statutory warranty deed that is attached to the materials.
Great. I wasn't planning on going out there with a measuring tape, so it's helpful. Thank you.
All right. For this evening, I have Jamie Housley for the applicant.
Yeah, we'll do introductions first, then I can go ahead.
Okay,
Jamie
thank you.
Housley, the applicant. You have my address with Jordan Raymond's law firm.
Rob Mecklenburg, I'm here on behalf of Sherwood Commerce Center, and I believe the address is also on there. So thank you.
So first of all, again, we want to thank Ms. Richter and Mr. Rutledge for all the time that they've spent with us fine-tuning these conditions and getting us to where I think we're in a very good place with the city. Just to address a couple of specific questions that were raised by commissioners. Yes, there, as Carrie had mentioned, there is a draft copy of the statutory warranty deed that we worked with them to draft to provide the certainty that the city wanted in terms of the language and making sure that they're getting conveyed what we're promising them will deliver there. And I think Eric said it astutely. It's really to provide us the best certainty we can that we can open up our buildings in time and start, utilizing them, and then allow the city to have the maximum flexibility they need in discussing the Kinder Morgan easement, because it implicates property beyond what we control. Going down to the condition G6, I think Vice Chair Waidola, I think it's only geared, this is only a modification to the prior approval, so it's really only geared at Sherwood Commerce Center Phase 1, and obviously as we come forward with Commerce Center Phase 2, that'll have its own process, and as Eric had pointed out, I don't believe that the Kinder Morgan easement is implicated in that property, but other real property issues may arise when we come forward with that. Other than that, really just here to answer any specific questions you have in relation to our request, and other than that, we would request that you move forward with approval and go from there. Thank you.
All right, my normal question is, do you accept the conditions that staff laid out, but it seems that you are in agreement.
We have spent a lot of time with Eric and Carrie on that, so yes, we're in agreement.
All right, excellent. Does anybody have any questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate working with staff. I know some of these things get way above our heads because we're not in the legal realm. We're in the review what legal tells us. So it's much appreciated that you were able to work so closely with staff and come to a resolution that's agreeable to both parties. That's very nice.
Yeah, again, we appreciate it. We think this is a win-win for both the city and our team, so thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I know the conditions look like they're not a ton of text, but a lot of thought and work went into it. So Eric and the rest of your staff, and I think Carrie's on the phone, really did a great job working with us.
Great. Thank you very much. And we do not have any other members of the audience this evening. Did anybody sign up to testify electronically this evening?
None.
Okay. So we have no proponents, opponents, or neutral testimony, so rebuttal seems to be unnecessary unless you guys want to leap up and say anything else for the record. They are shaking their heads no. Does staff have anything they would like to add which specifically addresses a question raised during their testimony? All right. Does any member of the commission have any questions regarding clarification of the testimony?
Can I ask a staff question?
Yes.
Can I ask staff? Okay.
Absolutely. Before we
The
close.
attachment 1, packet page 8 has G6 through G10. Is that what we're, because I think you only had 2 of these on the slide, but I might have missed them. All these conditions of approval.
The 2 on the report, I believe, are the 2 that are being removed. And
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yep, that's the
I'm
difference.
following.
Yeah, removal of these
Removal
two,
of those and then
then-
adding G6, G7, G8,
and then
G9,
adoption
G10.
of
Okay.
5 new conditions.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yep.
our attachment 5 has the revised.
Attachment 1, packet page 8.
Attachment 5 has the deletion of conditions B and 3, B, 3, and 4. Okay,
Thank you.
that was going to be my question: is
Yep.
where were we removing them? But that's an exhibit or attachment 5. Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we close? All right, so we're going to go ahead and close the public testimony portion of this hearing. Oops. So we're going to move into deliberation. Do we have a motion from the commission to move this forward?
I will in a moment.
Okay.
All right, I move the Sherwood Planning Commission approve the application for Sherwood Commerce Center, Phase 1, project number LU 2022028, based on the applicant testimony, public testimony, received and the analysis, findings, and conditions in the report.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve LU 2022-028 Sherwood Commerce Center Phase 1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you to staff for hard work in making a result that is favorable to all parties. All right. Now we are moving on to new business, the Sherwood West Concept Plan update. All right.
All right. So, Commission, I was here around 12 months ago, almost a year ago, giving you an update on this project. And we're going to be wrapping up this project within the next couple months. So I thought this would be a good time to kind of reintroduce the Commission to this project, kind of the work that we've done to date and where we're going. So yeah, meeting purpose tonight. Quick overview of the project, what we've done to date, what we've heard from the community thus far. We'll take a look at the draft concept plan maps, and then we'll also take a look at the employment and housing metrics and talk about next steps. But before I get into that, I just want to have a really quick discussion on what a concept plan is and what it isn't. So a concept plan is not a formal land use action. It can't be appealed to LUBA. We don't have any criteria in our development code, to adopt it as part of the comp plan or anything like that at the moment. What it is, it really sets the vision for a urban growth boundary expansion area, which Sherwood West is. And it really sets up the process for a urban growth boundary expansion ask if the council wants to ask Metro for an urban growth boundary expansion ask in the future. And that's a different process in and of itself, and that's a council decision. But a concept plan is required in order for us to make that ask. So if council decides when the time is appropriate to expand the urban growth boundary, we will have to have a concept plan for that area. It doesn't set zoning. Like I said, it doesn't bring that area into the urban growth boundary. It's just a vision, and it kind of sets those land use patterns that we would like to see in that area, and for things for the city to explore in the future. And we'll talk about some of those things this evening.
So can I ask a question? I don't want an answer. I just want to know conceptually, when it comes to us before hearing, your statement was that there's no adopted process and no findings that we would be doing. And the Sherwood West, Sherwood East, East Sherwood, whatever, on the other side, we didn't have a process and we failed to complete steps that were appropriate to ensure completion in a manner that we wanted. So will there be something formal that we accomplish when we do this, and what is our role in that specifically? And
so that's a great question. So your role as the planning commission, our CAC, our Community Advisory Committee, will be making a recommendation to the commission on this plan. You will review it, and then you will actually make another recommendation to City Council to whether or not to accept this plan or not, and you can give input on anything that you see in the plan.
will this body have an opportunity to review and revise?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And it will be formally adopted through the council?
It will be formally adopted or accepted through the council.
But not able to be enforced any means until we have an urban growth boundary expansion,
Correct.
right?
Yes, and so if the council decides to make an urban growth boundary expansion ask to Metro, and if that land or a portion of Sherwood West is brought in at any time, then we kick off the second phase, which is introducing what the zoning should be in that area. Any new development code that would need to be written to enact any, possibly new zones for that area, and then any goals and policies that we want to update in our comp plan for that area as well.
So is it possible that what gets accepted by city council is modified yet again through the ask and annexation process.
Correct. So it gets more and more refined as the process goes along.
Are we bound by the concept plan to do certain zonings?
Oh, it's a concept.
Concept plan. Okay. So the concept plan itself can change in the future as things develop, is kind of what you're saying.
It certainly can.
Mhm.
But it really creates that community vision, though, that community buy-in of what you would like to see occur in that area.
This is quite different from, a concept plan is very different versus a master plan, right?
Correct. And actually, I have a slide in the presentation because the CAC, we talked about the different kind of tools that are out there for development.
You're still in title slide. I'll stop.
Which could
Commissioner Kai's reading ahead, isn't he?
could be a master planning process, and that could be public, that could be private, and then we have planned unit developments. So I'm going to touch on that as we go along. So as you know, we had a preliminary concept plan that was adopted by resolution by the City Council in 2016. It was a preliminary concept plan. It didn't necessarily meet all the requirements of Metro Title 11, which sets requirements for concept plans. The concept plan that this relook kind of delves into a lot of questions centered around housing and densities and employment numbers. And I'm going to get into that here in just a couple minutes. But the 2016 plan was really a plan to inform future decision making. So the purpose of the relook.
Sorry, I have another question. I have a question on one of your bullets,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to get ahead. Second bullet and the very last one, proposed methods to finance the systems and facilities. So that's part of probably if we adopt this concept plan, is that something council looks at when they're putting together a proposal for the urban growth boundary expansion? Like, here's a concept plan, plus there's going to be parks, things we need to own, here's a plan for the financing. And what does that mean? Is that all part of that package?
Yep, that's all part of the package. And so we're getting that financing piece is this last piece of the concept plan. So the CAC is going to be kind of reviewing different tools that the city can use to finance.
Oh,
the
that's
public
within the CAC
infrastructure.
is looking at that too, then?
Yes,
Okay. So theirs is not just envisioning what's out there, it's how do we actually fund the thing too?
correct.
Interesting.
And all the different tools that are out there that the city can use to build infrastructure.
But to me, it's kind of like the comprehensive plan that we went through is that there will be a bucket of things, but no restrictions and no idea of what would be best for any particular expansion area, correct? So they're not going to come up with a budget per se, and
We'll come up with a great big estimated cost of all the public improvements. Or shouldn't say all of the public improvements, but public improvements for roads, water, and sewer. And then we'll kind of lay out what are the tools that are out there to pay for that infrastructure. You can do an urban renewal district. You can do a local improvement district. You can do a reimbursement district. You can, use X, Y, and Z to help pay for this public infrastructure. SDCs, system development charges. So,
grants, prayers,
yes.
bake sales.
Garage sale.
Yeah. Prayers.
So what this project did, we looked at new opportunities for employment and economic growth in Sherwood West. So in the 2016 plan, Sherwood West really kind of focused on housing and housing needs at that time. And we wanted to see a kind of a new balance of uses throughout the area. So we looked at some different land use growth patterns. And then we wanted to take a look at the transportation plan as well. And we wanted to look at the new state rules related to housing, especially House Bill 2001, and the implications that could play out in Sherwood West in regards to key housing metrics. So we kicked off this project in 2001, and it's almost been a 2-year project. We really kind of we were hoping to wrap up this project last fall, but I think the CAC really had some important questions that we delved into over the past couple of months, and we really wanted to answer those questions and do a deep dive and to make everybody feel comfortable with where we were going, as well as doing some extra outreach as well to our community. So about Sherwood West, it's about almost 1,300 acres. There's 126 property owners, 126 properties with 110 property owners, and the average size is around 9.8 acres. To the south is bounded by Chapman, to the north, Sherwood Road, and then, Elwert kind of goes north-south. So work and analysis to date. We've done a lot of work over the past 2 years. So we set up a new vision, or kind of reworked the vision for Sherwood West. We set up some goals and evaluation criteria for the plan document. We did a public engagement plan and how we were going to engage the public. We looked at the economic opportunities and challenges within Sherwood West itself, and we went out and we did an extensive stakeholder outreach at the very beginning of this project, where we talked to folks in all sorts of job growth areas out there. We talked to people in the hospitality industry. We talked to folks in healthcare. We talked to private developers who develop large corporate business parks. We talked to multiple people to kind of see what the development trends are out there, kind of related to mixed employment opportunities for this area. We did a review of housing policy implications, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. We looked at the transportation network, and then we had our first online open house survey, and the CAC reviewed that feedback. And when I say our CAC, I'm talking about our Community Advisory Committee, and they're made up of 15 Sherwoodians, both from inside our current city limits, and then a couple folks within Sherwood West itself.
But also a TA.
Yes, and we have a technical advisory committee, and our technical advisory committee is made up of a multitude of different partners that we work with, ODOT, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, the Wildlife Refuge, different city departments. So we're out there getting a lot of feedback on this concept plan. Meetings 1 through 5, we also took a look at some different concepts for Sherwood West, and we came up with these 6 kind of concepts that we've been weaving in and out of through this process. So we have been looking at mixed employment areas. We've been looking at the Chicken Creek Greenway, or making sure that we have a good active transportation network. Great neighborhoods, what do great neighborhoods entail? Making sure that we have livable and connected streets, and then kind of developing this design concept for Elwert Road. And I know last year, when I gave an update, I talked about these 6 plan concepts, and I'm just going to run through them really quick. Excuse me. So mixed employment areas, we are really looking at the right kind of jobs in the right places in Sherwood West. And when we talk about mixed employment areas, we're talking about a lot of different mix of employment opportunities. So you might see office, some light industrial, some flex space as well. This area, we really want to see it being focused on with like higher wage jobs to help balance the city's tax base, so we can build a self-sustaining and vibrant local community for Sherwood. Chicken Creek Greenway. So the Chicken Creek Greenway is really exciting in my opinion. I feel it's a great and huge asset to the Sherwood West community and to our Sherwood community as a whole. It provides a creek corridor system. It could provide access to nature. It could provide an area for nature trails. It could provide a buffer between different uses, between neighborhoods or industrial. And it, provides a place for wildlife and could also provide stormwater management functions as well. Active transportation. So we wanted to make sure that we have, and I'm going to, here in a couple more slides, we'll talk about more of kind of the active transportation in our trail system. So we really want to make sure that our destinations in Sherwood West are connected to current destinations within Sherwood or just outside of Sherwood. So we want to make sure that we have trails linking up with the refuge. We want to make sure that we are linking to the Cedar Brook trail system as well. So we really want to take advantage of that new Chicken Creek Greenway. And then, of course, we have the new Highway 99 pedestrian crossing too that is in the works. Great neighborhoods. So again, we want to plan for walkability. We want to plan for a variety of housing. Within the plan itself, and I'm going to get to these land use concepts here in a couple of more slides, but the CAC has been really, I think, innovative in how they're treating middle housing and middle housing concepts. They have developed a middle housing zone that just solely focuses on middle housing. So that could be anything from duplexes to quadplexes. And then they have also set up a kind of a new land use designation just strictly for cottage clusters. And that will allow the community to develop some different standards, some different, when I talk about when I say standards, different regulations within our development code kind of around that middle housing that doesn't have to be the same as House Bill 2001 and what it states in state statute.
So we can zone middle housing and have it confined to that? So I thought House Bill 2001 said you have to allow anything in any zoning where you
It
allow
doesn't
single
confine
family.
it.
Right, it doesn't confine it. So it's like,
How would they envision middle housing if you can't control what developers want to apply for?
so it doesn't confine middle housing. Like we could allow it in other zones, or other areas, but what this plan does, and we'll take a look at it in our concept plan map, is it sets aside some areas that would be strictly just for middle housing types.
Can you do that too? Say this is only middle housing and you can't build single family?
You can.
So it goes one way but not the other way. 2001 does. Great. Wonderful law.
Problem.
So we really want to make sure that the new neighborhoods in Sherwood West integrate with the existing neighborhoods here in Sherwood through residential design standards, and we want to plan for schools and parks and green spaces as well, because we know that green spaces and trails are very, very popular within the Sherwood community. So again, livable and connected streets. We want to make sure that our streets are safe. Our streets are well connected within the Sherwood West area. We want to make sure that streets are places for all people of all ages and abilities, and we want to provide all modes of travel.
Erica? I was just wondering, something that I thought that comes across to me when I go through different parts of Sherwood are oftentimes, I've seen other communities where they're primarily residential, but on your, I don't know if these would be arterial streets or not. I feel like in Sherwood, there's some major streets or major neighborhood streets that have driveways and residents, housing that are on them. And one example is Meineke, that has homes that are, and I imagine that those were built long before, but it seems like it's a road that's not conducive to having residents access their driveways on that type of street. At what level does the kind of planning happen where, because it seems like those homes really should be facing into the neighborhood that they're a part of versus out onto a major street like Meineke. Is that something that happens in this level of planning, or is it further down the line?
That would be further down the line.
Okay.
So, when properties come in for development, we look at access, we look at driveways and access spacing and where the streets are for the driveways. Yes, Jean? Oh, no, okay. So meetings 6 through 11, I'm telling you, we've done lots of work here. We did a buildable lands inventory for Sherwood West. So we took out all of the constraints and we really wanted to see how many buildable acres we were looking at in Sherwood West, so we could look at how many acres of employment versus how many acres of residential land needs there could be. And that kind of really helped us out with our housing metrics assumptions as well. So we did some scenario planning and concepts with the CAC. We looked at the housing metrics, and at the very end here, we'll talk about those housing metrics, but we looked at the implications of middle housing within Sherwood West, and we kind of looked at, okay, if 10% if Sherwood West develops with 10% middle housing, what would the density be, and 15% and 20 and so on. We looked at a proposed north-south connector road because there was some conversation about needing another north-south connector road other than Elwert within the plan area. And then we took a look at the jobs to housing analysis and the balance of jobs to housing. And once again, in my last slide here, we're going to talk about that metrics and what that looks like. And Commissioner Kai, we also had a great conversation with the TAC with the CAC and TAC about all the different kind of tools that are out there for development and master planning and what that could look like, as we progress through this process and as Sherwood West is brought into the urban growth boundary. So we talked about master planning. The city, we could do a city-led master plan process for a certain portion or all of Sherwood West, for that matter, once it's brought into the UGB. We talked about the private developer-led master planning process. We had a lot of questions about how Villabra was developed, and that was a private developer-led master plan. And then we had a conversation of planned unit developments and what that looks like. And I know Planning Commission, you've reviewed a lot of planned unit developments over the past couple of years.
And the downfall of all those items. Master planning, PUD, anything, is the House Bill 2001 doesn't recognize any of those.
Right. So, we
so
would still
even if
be
you were
incorporating.
even if you were to master plan single family, high density, middle housing, the House Bill 2001 negates your master plan by overlaying middle housing.
Even on the single family zone.
Correct, even if you master plan it. The only master plan that's allowed to operate as a master plan are those that were in existence prior to 2001. So a master plan in Villebois doesn't mean that it would work here. It would still be subject to the other thing, unless you've gone through legal and found another way to actually have control of our own master plan or PUD process.
You would still have to incorporate middle housing types within a master plan.
You have to incorporate them, but not only do you have to incorporate them, even if you zone single family and middle housing and high density, middle housing still can be developed under any circumstance in your single family residence,
Yes.
even if you have a master planned area that accommodates middle housing someplace else. So to Counselor or Commissioner Vance, Counselor, gave you a promotion. Point is that why have middle housing if you have to allow it any place?
Yep.
If you have to allow it every place, why already zone it
We're going to
someplace?
zone it and then get more than even that.
Correct.
So from an outreach standpoint, do we do any outreach to our state representatives, our metro representatives, to make sure they can hear from the various people below the city council level that are living, working, and planning these areas of that need? I mean, that's, there's a gap between what's happening in Salem, what's happening at the local level, which everyone knows, but is there anyone reaching across the aisle to say, hey, come listen to this meeting, see how we're developing for this future, because this is how the bills you're passing down in Salem are impacting what we're trying to do here in the next 20 and 30 years.
Right, because if we were to master plan our community and say, we acknowledge middle housing as an important tool within our community, and in fact, we appreciate having cottage clusters or these other tools to enable our community to age in place. However, we can't plan our community because any master plan we put in place is circumvented by this plan, by this House bill.
Yeah.
So is there an outreach ability? Okay.
I really want to say that, anyone can advocate to the legislature.
Because this is not an executive branch interpretation of law. This is the law, right? 2001 states it clearly, I believe, in these cases. So it's not like, oh, who do we negotiate with at the executive level?
And this wouldn't be about lobbying to the state legislature. This would be about getting our individual reps into our meetings, into the territories and districts that they represent.
And saying we should, House Bill 2001 should have a master planned opportunity that if you accommodate middle housing at a level, that your master plan would be accepted for the zones that are being planned.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate all that input, and we do have, really for the city and providing input to, in a formal capacity, the city itself, as opposed to you as individuals, residents of Sherwood. City council would be the appropriate body for that to go through. So I think Councilor Stankey is taking notes here.
Right, but if we could invite them, that's a really good idea too.
Well, I think it would be great if we could invite them, but then, as Eric is talking about, lobbying as a municipality, I think would be beneficial as well. Because if essentially what you're saying is we wouldn't necessarily do it as a planning commission, it would be done by the city council up to the state level, correct?
I mean, it could come from planning commissioners, but you'd want council's blessing.
Yeah.
That they are the policy makers. So
Yeah.
you don't want to show up representing the city without, without policy direction or a blessing from
Yeah.
city council. And likely at that level, you're probably sending the mayor or somebody else, as long as they, agree. Yeah. And I'm just curious, and I don't know if this type of zoning, the middle housing zoning and HB 2001, it's all so new. And so I think to all of your points as well, we're still figuring out, how all this is actually going to play out. And I think at that point, I mean, we're kind of going through it right now with the concept plan where we're figuring out, okay, you pass this new law. And I think Tigard, has done some concept planning. Sherwood is probably number 2, or we're kind of doing it at the same time. So we're in new territory here, with HB 2001 and concept planning. And so these are all new and good questions. And I think we're going to be tracking just how things turn out at the planning stage, but also at the actual implementation and development stage as well, and see what happens with as much control as we can as a local jurisdiction.
And that's why the CAC asked for additional information. There was almost 2-month delay as we were saying, what does this mean to our concept plan, and ask more questions. And the question then becomes, are we doing a good job by being first in and we get to experiment with what's happening, or are we going to be better if we hold back and wait to see what happens with a couple other jurisdictions? And that would be, that's a big question mark right now, to say, do you want to be first in and be the guinea pig so that you can see what happens?
There's a lot of practical issues too. Like part of this is the cost, like you're saying, infrastructure. If we think we're zoning single family, we're planning for this area of single family and planning pipes and roads to accommodate that, and then somebody wants to come in and develop 4 times the population there that we thought. We haven't built that. How are people going to get water and sewer there all of a sudden?
Plan for that.
But we have to plan for it. So we got to build 4 times the infrastructure for something that might not happen. I mean, this is why you do master planning. It's a real challenge.
Very well said. I think that's like bullet point number 1 to the state legislature when a master plan is done. So infrastructure targets are made.
But before asking more questions, how much further do you have in the presentation? Because I don't want to slow you down.
Yep, we'll keep moving, sorry.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
How much further do you have in your presentation before I start asking more questions? I don't want to slow you down too much and sidetrack us.
Like Commissioner Vance does.
You can ask your question.
Like that guy.
Just ask.
So I guess one of my questions on the light industrial. So in the map I saw in tonight's presentation, it looks like a pretty older version. I think it was pre the rework of everything when the CAC put out the call to the community to go, hey, what do you like? These different areas, different ideas. It seems like that upper northeastern corner was almost exclusively light industrial, something like that. And I got 2 concerns that as you're coming in from Sherwood down Roy Rogers, that's the first thing you see, which is already the first thing you see when you're coming down to Alton Sherwood. But then also we're putting any associated light industry or industrial traffic associated with that to have to route through the entirety of Sherwood to get to I-5. And so what I'm getting to, is there any way in this Sherwood West planning that we can balance maybe the light industrial jobs with future growth and tied to TEA future growth and expansion in that area, so that we say, well, if we do this and we're making the conscious decision to make this mostly residential retail type area, but then that means our next stab at this has to be increasing urban growth in TEA so we can add industrial jobs there and get them closer to the freeway and make sure that traffic does not bisect as much as Sherwood as possible. So those are my thoughts. So
Great thoughts, and we're going to talk about transportation and the land use pattern here in just a couple minutes.
all right. So that's why I was asking.
Right. No, it's good to get those questions out now, and then I can prepare for a great answer here. So the CAC, we looked at some trails and open spaces, and the right amount of park acreage for the Sherwood West area. We did a great exercise with the CAC. So we did a land use alternative mapping exercise, and we had great maps that were to scale. We had the land use designations and little chip forms with certain acreages. And so the CAC, they broke out into 3 separate groups. They made 3 different land use alternative maps, and we took those maps out to an open house, an in-person open house last October to get feedback on these maps, what people liked, what they didn't like, if we were missing anything, and to really kind of like search out those hot button topics within the community, within those land use maps. We had over 80 people in attendance. We did a survey online as well. And then we did a developer tour with industrial and commercial developers to talk about what we heard at the open house, to talk about the 3 concept plan maps that we had from the CAC to get their input. And then we looked at a transportation impact analysis. And then we brought everything back to the CAC for their review and to get their feedback. And they kind of narrowed down a land use concept map with those 3 alternatives and community feedback. So with that, what we heard from the community, there was support for additional employment uses in Sherwood West. There was support for kind of that large employment uses in the northern plan portion of the area. There was support for additional employment uses along 99. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a couple of minutes. People really, encouraged a balance of uses in Sherwood West. There's always a continued support for open spaces and connected trails. There was support for cottage cluster housing types within Sherwood West so people could age in place. And then we heard from residents in the Eastview neighborhood that weren't necessarily in support of a new north-south connector road, and we're going to take a look at that road here in just a couple minutes here. So the concept plan map summaries. So this is the draft concept plan map that came out of the CAC's work. In the northern section here, let me see if I can get my little laser pointer out. So the northern area of the plan, this purple area, we have about a little over 200 acres for mixed employment. And what we're talking about for that mixed employment area, I know that we've been talking about kind of an innovative technology park, office park in that area, and making sure that the uses really are comparable to the uses that we want to see from our economic opportunities analysis. So that's really that, focusing on clean tech opportunities within that area. In this area too, we kind of below that employment use, we have some middle housing and different housing types, multifamily. We have a park right down here, and we have a medium density neighborhood zone at the corner of Elwert and Edie, just kind of across the street from the existing Mandel Farms subdivision. Heading towards the west here, it's primarily low density residential neighborhoods with 2 community parks. So those little tiny stars that you see are neighborhood parks. And as we go down Elwert here, again, we are looking at different types of residential housing, from medium density residential to cottage clusters. And really that cottage cluster designation, like I was talking about, is really just a land use designation, like that's focusing on cottage cluster development. Getting down towards Sherwood High School along Kruger, once again, there's kind of a mixture of different uses. We have mixed use development right along Kruger, multifamily, again, some cottage cluster housing, a little hospitality zone right in the corner here. And then heading south down along Highway 99. Again, we have some small commercial use, and then this large kind of like hospitality designation. And when we talk about kind of this hospitality designation, we've talked about different types of concepts for this area. In the 2016 preliminary concept plan, we talked about, gateway to wine country, kind of farm to table uses, kind of making it a a destination for folks to come to.
I think the latest meetings have changed it from hospitality to hospitality tourism destination. So it's not just a wine and a hotel. It's a destination area.
And then we have a large park up near Chicken Creek. That park is around 15 to 20 acres in size, so similar to Snyder Park. So trails, parks, and open space here.
Erica, are there other parks in the plan too? I remember when we looked at the Parks Master Plan, it was, oh yeah, I see another one up there, but there was like a whole range of different sizes, like pocket parks and, then a Snyder size park or whatever. Are those kind of interspersed, some of those?
They are.
Those are little neighborhood park. Okay, I see them
So
now.
when
These
those little
green
stars
ones.
are kind of those neighborhood parks
Okay.
that could range from 2 to 5 acres, but then you kind of get those pocket parks too when you have subdivisions being
And
built.
PUDs, yeah.
Yep, and
Okay.
planned unit developments as well.
Erica, what's so like what would be in commercial versus hospitality? I'm just wondering, because it just seems like there's just is there more commercial necessarily, or is it just a small area down near the bottom there?
So that's a great question. So we kind of come up with this general concept theme for like hospitality destination, but we haven't really fleshed out like all the different types of uses that might be allowed within that area quite yet. So that would be the next step.
But like, but hospitality would or could include retail as well, or okay,
Yes.
okay.
I would envision local, small-scale shops, not a large commercial strip mall type situation.
As long as there's a Chick-fil-A in it.
Yeah, pretty much. That was pretty much guaranteed. No, I'm just kidding. Please, no.
Did I see you had another middle school or something on there? What was the
Yeah,
one middle
great-
school,
great
approximately
point.
30 acres? One
Commissioner
elementary
Vance.
school.
So
Yep.
You're really testing our eyes here.
I know it's testing my eyes too. So
Get closer.
we know that within this plan area there is going to be a needed middle school and a needed elementary school in this area at some point in the future. And in speaking to the Sherwood School District, and they have told us that those schools will be needed in the later stage of Sherwood West. So we're looking at 10 to 15 years possibly down the road. But we wanted to call that out.
Oh,
That a middle
It's not-
school could
it's
take
not.
up 30 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty
elementary
huge
school.
relative to the rest of this map. Takes up a huge chunk.
And so a couple things. One is when it comes to the planning commission, will they have will they see the 3 iterations as background information?
Yes.
And then having a map that shows right across the street that, the Ridges is right across the street. So in one of the school board, no, not school board. We had a
Meetings.
we had a school board not a school board representative, a school representative at our CAC, and he was not able to commit any school funds or resources or even land allocation, which is, he wanted to be really careful to say need it towards the end of the horizon period, and this is the size, but he didn't want to do a commitment to what and where, because repurposing the Ridges or doing something in that area may be more feasible than anything we could come up with at a concept plan this early.
So it's not within our purview to allocate for schools then?
Because they don't have
Just do.
money to.
Yeah.
Because the school doesn't have money to buy it right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That brings up, it's another question. Is there any institutional zoning in this?
There is not
Okay.
at the current iteration, but we do show, parks. That's a public institutional use. Trails, parks, and open space. So we have a park just north of Elwert, right up here. We have an additional large park close to Chicken Creek. We have several different neighborhood parks. We have some trails along the Chicken Creek Greenway that connect to the Wildlife Refuge. We have trails connecting to the Cedar Creek Trail and the Ice Age Tonkin Trail. And we really wanted to make sure that all of our trails, parks, and open spaces are interconnected with one another within this planned concept.
On a previous map, I saw there was another park located on Roy Rogers, right where the construction's being headquartered. Did those fall out? Yeah, right there, yeah.
The city has purchased a parcel of land right in that area. We don't know what it could or could not be in the future. It could be the possibility of park space in the future. We just don't know quite yet.
I saw that on a previous version. It was earmarked as a park.
So we have our street connectivity map, and actually I'm going to fast forward here because I think I have some better slides that talk about the conceptual transportation system. So we show here our existing streets kind of in the bold color, and then we have our future conceptual transportation kind of concept plan map on the right there, which we show proposed future streets, and then we show streets for further study. So in speaking with the CAC about our transportation options, in 2016 we had two different concepts for Elwert Road. We had Elwert Road in its current alignment, and then we showed Elwert Road rerouted.
Vacated.
with two roundabouts, and we have shown those two concepts again within this plan, and what we know is that if Elwert is rerouted, we kind of need to study that area a little bit more, but that is the preferred option of the CAC at this moment in time, is to reroute Elwert to help slow it down.
And the alternative is, because of the terrain, the intersection would have to be elevated and create an overcrossing or undercrossing situation. Elwert and Edie, if they stay at this, they'll have to
Right in
be
here.
like an overpass situation, because Elwert and Edie are in the grade change there is so significant,
And it's in a floodplain.
and it's in a floodplain.
And the classification, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. And the crossing going this way is the narrowest crossing. That would be a single crossing instead of two. Yeah.
And these are just the collector streets, or what's the classification of these streets?
Oh my goodness. So Elwert is a 3-lane arterial. We have Kruger as the collector. We have the extension of Handley as a collector as well. And then Edie Road heading into the existing Sherwood here is also a collector. And then all of the other roads would be neighborhood streets.
Thanks.
We took a look at this Eastview Road, another kind of this north-south connector here, and what that could possibly look like. We know that there are topographical challenges crossing Chicken Creek here. We've heard from the Eastview Neighborhood Homeowners Association that live in this neighborhood right up here. They are opposed to another north-south connector coming up this way. We know that if this is something that the community would want, we need to study it a bit more in the future. So we've kept it on here as a future conceptual street.
Because in the beginning, Elwert residents were requesting a bypass or a relief. So we got two neighborhoods that are, Elwert wants relief because there's already a lot of traffic, and if we're adding this much more, they want another north-south road to help relieve the traffic on Elwert. And then Eastview is concerned about a north-south road impacting their, and then the crossing of Chicken Creek would be difficult because of the grade.
And we can't really go north because it's not part of where the expansion of the urban growth boundary is.
We can't look at it.
We can't
correct?
look at that.
Right,
Actually,
up
does
in-
that
Up in this area.
become urban reserve then? Or does it just go straight from urban growth boundary to rural reserve at that point? Because sometimes there's urban reserve designated too. How does that fit in?
So Sherwood West is designated as an urban reserve. So
Right.
everything outside of Sherwood West is designated as a rural reserve area. So when this rural reserve, and if this rural reserve area ever becomes an urban reserve area, it could be a long, long time
I see.
from now.
And that's why the shape is what it is. Like this northwest corner is kind of like, looks like stairs and kind of comes around. It's probably property lines and just where the reserve boundary is. Okay. Which was set
Or a 50-year time horizon.
long time, yeah.
I mean,
some time
if you
ago.
look in that northern area, like it looks like it runs into another creek, a significant creek
There's a
area that probably has a lot of topographical issues.
And we couldn't request to bring that part into the urban growth boundary too because it's not urban reserve?
Correct.
correct.
Okay, so there's all these phases. All right. Yep.
The urban rural reserve was set for a 50-year time horizon
Yep.
about 10 years ago, I think, wasn't it?
You know, regarding the road, I mean, how much legacy, I don't want to say resentment, but legacy issues are there around the west side bypass idea with new roads going into this area? Is that something that there's any rumblings of? Because I know there's the whole idea of a west side bypass coming through on the west side of Sherwood has been something that the county's been floating for quite some time but has not come to fruition. So nothing, okay.
So our key ideas here for transportation. So Southwest Elwert realignment requires some additional study, and so does that north-south connector route. Right now, we just identified it as conceptual. So the streets in Sherwood West, all streets will be upgraded to comply with, city urban standards. Selected roadways will have one travel lane in each direction with center turn lanes. So we're looking at Sherwood Road, Elwert Road, Edie Road, east of Elwert, and Chapman. We know that the pedestrian overcrossing near Sunset is planned. And then we have a grade separated, we've looked at another kind of grade separated crossing just north of Chapman between the Brookman area and the Sherwood West area as well.
Why there versus further north, where I guess just because that's where it touches more of the city?
Less developed.
Yeah, I guess that's a good. No, I like, because I know that there's discussion around something at potentially at Cedar Creek.
Yes.
But I don't know how. I know that that's separate from this, and I don't know how likely any of that is.
So this could be, another grade separated crossing down to the south that would connect Brookman and the Sherwood West areas. What that would look like, I don't know. It could be an overcrossing or an undercrossing at this point. So we did a transportation impact analysis, and you can actually find all of this information online within our CAC packets. But our recommendations are to adopt a design concept for Elbert Road for a 3-lane arterial with bike lanes and sidewalks. We want to further study the realignment of Elbert Road, kind of, to pick the best route and layout in that area. Upgrade Edie Road from Elbert Road to Borchers Drive as a 3-lane collector per our current TSP. Upgrade Edie Road west of Chicken Creek to a 2-lane collector, and then really keep that north-south connector in the plan as a concept so we can study it further here in the future to ensure, whether or not it makes the most sense. So looking at our employment and housing metrics for the area, I'm going to talk about jobs. So we have about 255 total acres for our different industrial and commercial uses within Sherwood West. And it's broken out in that second column here in net acres for each kind of designation that we're looking at. And we get to about a total jobs of a little over 4,000, so 4,346 total jobs. And when we look at our total housing units, which is going to be on the next slide, if Sherwood West, if we develop at 0%, middle housing, our jobs housing ratio comes out to be about 1.4 jobs per household. And then if we develop between 0 to 10% middle housing, we're looking at somewhere, between that 1.4 and 1.2 jobs per housing unit. Which anything above 1 is a pretty good balance. So our housing metrics here. So we looked at, the possible densities in Sherwood West with our residential zones. So our total acres comes out to be about 345 acres for residential development within Sherwood West. And then we took a look at our total average density. If those zones, if we were to develop 0% with middle housing, we are looking at a total households being a little over 3,000 households with a total average density of 9.2. But then when we add our open space requirements into that, we get back down to about 7.8 housing units per acre. And then we looked at 10% middle housing, 20% middle housing, and 50% middle housing, and what those total average densities would be, and what those total average densities would be with open space.
And so just for clarity, in the multifamily, and in all cases, we did the math based on the most dense. So in multifamily, 24, middle housing's 11, cottage cluster 16, assuming that the developers are going to develop to the maximum possible in the density that they're allowed to build into. And in the top 3 zones, multifamily, middle housing, and cottage cluster, there's no adder for middle housing, because if you're already in that zone, you don't get it. And then if you're in one of the bottom 3 zones, you can go from 11 units per acre up to 44 units per acre, but the maximum this slide represents is only 50% being developed in the multi-housing, assuming that development in Sherwood is going to be at some level single-family residence. And that's the question, is if middle housing is allowed, what do we think single-family zoning is going to be? Do we think it's going to be 0% middle housing, or do we think it's going to be some other mix of single-family residence and middle housing?
Can I ask a clarifying question? I apologize if I missed this, and still kind of coming into this project, but in middle housing and cottage cluster, do we know, maybe we don't even know yet, are we going to permit single-family residences? Or would those zones just be for middle housing and cottage cluster?
That is for continued conversation.
TBD, yeah, I was afraid you might say that.
I thought from the conversation earlier, though, we said that middle housing can be just middle housing.
It can't, correct, it can be middle
Zone
housing.
middle housing can't be single family.
Well,
Could
so
be.
it could be. You could have both. So let's say we wanted to create a cottage cluster zone, and within that zone, you could allow for cottage clusters, and you may allow for single-family residences.
But potentially we could say, and this would be at a future state where when we adopt the zoning and the actual development code to go with it, potentially we could say no single-family homes, cottage cluster only. I'm not recommending that, but we could go that route.
Or the criteria for single-family residence in a cottage cluster is a criteria that's different than our regular single-family,
Right.
which would be a blending of cottage cluster and our current 5,000 square foot home standard, or not 5,000 square foot lot standard for single-family residence. Sorry. Sorry, our houses are not all 5,000 square foot.
One more follow-up question, I think you'll see what I'm getting to, is I'm just wondering then if, because I think we are required to also look at our housing needs over the next 20 years and plan as part of Sherwood West our housing needs analysis. So I'm just wondering if we're planning for middle housing, is that where are we needing to hit a certain target minimum?
So we took a look at that, and so in the housing needs analysis and state rules, we want to plan for the opportunity of 50% of 50% multifamily and 50% single-family residential.
Okay. And cottage cluster, I guess my point was, and question was, if we're planning for middle housing, does that decrease the multifamily potentially?
It does not.
Okay. So
we've
got to plan for both.
We've looked at that, and we are meeting that target.
Okay.
We're just a little. I think right now we're just a little bit shy. We add them up, but
Yeah, I was basically just
very
wondering,
minimal.
is the middle housing making up for some higher density? But it doesn't sound like it is actually. Okay.
We just did that, a year and a half ago? We went through that.
Something like that.
Just one other thought that kind of occurred to me. Your question was interesting. If we have multifamily but allow single family, can we do that? Possibly, but I would think the way the law is written, that means now we've basically allowed any kind of housing. Because the law says anywhere you allow a single family, anything else can get built. So it's not like we then get multifamily or single housing. We get multifamily or anything else if we allow single housing.
right.
Which
Single
then
family.
Your cottage cluster could become townhomes,
Yeah.
which then defeats the aging in place goals of cottage clusters.
And
Wild West.
And I think that
Anything
And I think like CAC kind of really developed these innovative concepts of why not just have a zone that strictly looks at middle housing, and why not have a zone or an area that's strictly for cottage clusters. Excellent. Excellent question. So we are going to be kind of looking at a phasing plan with our plan for infrastructure and kind of what that would look like. And so our next steps here are actually, so we're developing kind of the infrastructure funding and phasing strategy right now. Our next CAC meeting is, actually this hasn't been updated, it's in March and not February. They'll be taking a look at kind of what the infrastructure funding would look like. I envision that we will run through the public hearings process and accept a plan, and then we will develop some annexation policies around that infrastructure and phasing that'll come after the acceptance of the plan document itself.
You also, when it comes to planning commission, have a timeline of acceptance by council, the next metro look for urban growth expansion, and what's our window for adopting code changes and that?
Yes.
That doesn't
because
look like a very long,
This
that doesn't look like enough time for us to get code implemented for annexation if we don't have our act together to have annexation in place.
So here's kind of a short timeline. I think some of the other topics that you hit on aren't addressed in this timeline. But you know, we are looking at council adoption or acceptance of this plan late spring. Late spring, early summer, we're going to be looking at some annexation policies. In fall, winter, or actually, we don't have to talk about that right now. But fall, winter, council will need to make a decision whether or not they need to move ahead with the UGB expansion proposal. And then we make that proposal to Metro next spring.
So it would, by the end of
By the
this year,
end of this year,
we
or
need to
early
have,
next year, we'll have those kind of annexation policies teed up so we can.
seems like we need to have them done before we start asking for an expansion, because we also want to get code in place for new zones by the end of the year also.
Well, speaking of new codes, that's kind of that'll be the next step, is that comprehensive planning for Sherwood West. So looking at what new codes need to be written, if any. So we'll have that conversation as this project progresses down the road.
So what's Metro's typical turn time for reviewing proposals and approving stuff?
A couple of months.
Oh, really?
Anywhere
Okay.
from 3 to 4 months has been kind of their review process for UGB.
So by the end of summer, we could have an expanded urban growth boundary, essentially.
With the annexation requests coming in, that's why I'm saying if we wait
Well,
to tee something
it,
up.
It has to be zoned first before folks can actually annex. And so that's that next step of that comprehensive planning, is making sure that each of the parcels are zoned appropriately.
Right, but I'd like to have the zoning language already on the books before we start entertaining what we're going to be zoning, so people can have already in adopted language through DLCD and the whole 9 yards of these are the zones that we now have in our community, and you're going, before we start trying to apply zoning, I don't want, it just doesn't, if we wait too long, we'll be doing too much all at once. We'll not have one thought out process before we get slammed with another one, and people coming in for zoning when we're still trying to write the zoning code. I would have fear that we're not, that we're not doing both at the same time, telling people what their zoning is and making the zoning up at the same time, so.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
that
Yes.
I mean, they can't come in the day after we approve it and want to be annexed.
Well, our annexation rules right now don't prevent it. I mean, we don't have very good annexation code in City of Sherwood right now. As long as they're adjacent to the existing city limits, correct? There's
It could be, our annexation code could be stronger.
so that's why I'm saying if we wait till too far down, annexation occurs very easily at an applicant's request.
So should we start looking at annexation code this year as a
We are
commission?
going to.
We are going
Yes.
to, okay.
Yes.
yeah, we may, I mean, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we may adopt new annexation policies specific for Sherwood West. So if there's specific challenges, related to Sherwood West, we could be adopting new annexation policy to address this area specifically. But I think your point is well taken, Chair Simpson. We don't want, at the end of the day, we have to have zoning in order to approve a development. And so, I mean, I don't know for sure, but what may happen is if we're not ready, they're not able to develop. But we don't want that either. And so I think your point is well taken. We need to have the zoning in place in case these areas, certain properties, based on the annexation policy, are ready to go quickly and there's actual market interest. You know, properties at the very west end of Sherwood West, they're likely not going to be eligible for annexation. So, but for those properties, you know, that are immediately adjacent, yeah, we want to have the infrastructure planning set and also the zoning set so that we can move forward if the market is there and we get applications in.
Is there a map, like, that might be helpful in the future to see that, you know, water sewer lines where they are today? Just an idea for, you know, where future expansion, logical. Obviously, if there's nothing in a certain area, that's going to be like a later phase, likely. So we have that somewhere.
We do, and we have a technical memo that kind of addresses those questions coming out as well for our next TAC meeting.
So surprisingly, I think, isn't the north area the first area that's your expectation for it to, besides what's right across the street from the bridges, all the industrial area and that flat land is a pretty prime area. It's the right, and it's one of the last flat, large industrial opportunities in the area.
Seems like everything south of Chicken Creek would be easiest because there's no wetlands to cross.
Right, but this is ready to go too, I think. The north of Chicken Creek on Sherwood Road. Is it not?
Really kind of get into, I don't want to
Weeds, yeah.
jump into the weeds and jump ahead of what the CAC is going to be reviewing. This area right in here, just because it's already so close to the existing subdivisions on the other side of Elwert, it's probably the easiest to serve with infrastructure. This southern portion down here, once the Brookman sewer trunk line comes up and is extended to the Sherwood West High School, which the time frame now I believe is 2025. That's really going to open up this entire area for development. What I think what we're seeing is kind of an area that's harder to serve, or we need to look at and refine, is this northern area.
So for access to that northern area on Roy Rogers, will there be a expansion of the bridge that crosses Chicken Creek to 4 lanes? So as I understand, Roy Rogers goes back down to 2 lanes there, and there's no plan to take that to 4 lanes in the foreseeable future.
That is a good question, and that's a county project, and I don't think right now that there is a project to increase it to 4 lanes.
Did that go back to the whole transportation point earlier? Is we got then even a narrow bottleneck, but then gets back up to the new improved road.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think that's to be determined on, I think there's 2 crossings there. There's 2 bridges, if you will, there.
Well, Tualatin further down is still 2 lane, and there's no, from what I understood a year or 2 ago, those 2 weren't in the foreseeable future funding for expanding those 2 bridges, either Chicken Creek or Tualatin River.
Yes, I think potentially, I mean, it'd probably be a big ask of a developer, but depending on what goes in there, you know, they could be required to make improvements. And I just wanted to just reinforce the fact that this northern area that you see in purple, the employment area, I mean, we have to go through the process of developing the development code, of course, but again, the thought is, you know, high-tech park I think is ideal. We're really not looking at this as like any type of general industrial zone. So, of course, with any employment, you're going to have more trucks and things like that than you would have with residential, but it won't be a distribution facility, for example. It's going to be more of a, hopefully mix of office, industrial, research and development, that type of more passenger vehicles. So without getting too far ahead on the actual development, we don't see this as a really heavy industry area.
Maybe semiconductor manufacturing or reshoring some of that, those chips.
Now you're talking like Bruce Coleman. Yes.
There you go. Yep.
Well, I saw Lamb took over more of the new stuff. That's exciting.
All right, so when do you anticipate it coming to the planning commission for deliberation and discussion? May.
May. Tentatively, right now, we're looking at May.
Excellent. Any other questions of Erica regarding our?
I just want to say that if you really want to take a deep dive into the technical work that the CAC has reviewed, you can go online on the project page and kind of read, through the packet materials, and also there's a nice little video about Sherwood West and why we're planning for it online as well.
Is there a meeting coming up March 2nd? I have something in the back of my head for that.
Yes.
Okay.
CAC. A CAC tentative meeting is scheduled for March 2nd at 5:30 here in this room.
They run a tight ship there. The agenda runs on time for sure. Don't you? We leave on time. I'm not in charge. So. That being said, does anybody else have any other commissioner comments before we adjourn? All right. We have 2 openings, so let your friends know. And it looks like staff has brought us Valentine's treats, so enjoy. Thank you very much. You guys are so thoughtful to us. All right, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then you can leave your packets from the hearing for